G'day guys, welcome back to True Footy. The dust has settled on the 2024 draft, where everyone's had time to enjoy the presents we opened on November 20th and 21st. In today's video, I thought we'd have a little look into the future, and 12 months from now, what does the 2025 draft look like? It's time to start taking some interest in that, especially when you consider it's interesting how many teams have invested in next year's draft, and we'll discuss, the general profile of the draft. Is it strong? Is it deep? Are there talls? Is it compromised? We have pretty firm answers on all of those questions. We'll discuss a little bit as well why the 2025 draft also might be quite important. So today we're going to give you a little bit of a preview, a bit of a forecast 12 months from now, bearing in mind a lot can change between now and then. There's some really interesting characteristics of next year's draft as well. And it's interesting to see how many teams already have amazing draft hands 12 months from now. This was also an enormous period for the channel. Thanks to everyone who's hopped on board. The trade and draft period is always the biggest time of the year for this channel. So thank you for everyone who tuned in. And if there's anyone out there who wants to see more content like this and hasn't subscribed, I appreciate it if you did subscribe. All right, let's talk about the 2025 draft. So for some time now, this one has been highlighted as the most compromised draft we've ever seen. And now that I've done the legwork on it, it's definitely true. So what do we mean by compromised? I'm essentially referring to how many father-son and academy prospects we have, and it's alarming how many first-round Northern Academy prospects are in next year's draft, which means there's so many top prospects that are be going probably in the top 10 to 25 in some cases that are already club aligned. So that makes it a little bit difficult if you are not one of those clubs. There's also been some rule changes around next year as well, which we'll discuss in this video, which will make it a little bit trickier for those clubs, particularly those northern clubs, to be able to acquire all of their talents. I was thinking as well, this 2025 draft does loom in as a fairly important one when you consider the advent of Tasmania coming around the corner. So if we use the previous expansion clubs as a template, we know that the 2027 draft will be heavily compromised because that's when Tasmania enter the competition. That's when presumably they'll have a whole stack of draft picks to build their list, which might mean that even in 2026, we might see a degree of compromisation where, well, at least using Gold Coast and GWS as an example there, both of those clubs could pre-list 17-year-olds the year before, which did impact the actual quality and the depth of that draft. So in other words, 2025 might be the last draft before the advent of Tasmania, who once they're in will in turn dilute the competition by, of course, being that 19th team, meaning everyone has to wait an extra pick between their own draft picks. But 2025 is the last year before Tasmania start getting their hands on draft talent before other clubs can get to them. I think this is also why we saw a lot of clubs really prioritize the 2024 draft this year. It was twofold. It was a strong and deep draft, and clubs were unwilling to trade out of it, especially with 2025 being compromised. So 2024, in a sense, was the best opportunity before Tasmania comes in to access that top talent. Sometime this week as well, I'm going to film a video analyzing which teams in the competition are best placed and worst placed for when Tasmania arrives. So how does this draft in 2025 compare to 2024? Well, the hallmark of the 2024 draft was that it was exceptionally deep, which meant there were a lot more AFL draftable talents that went later into the draft. And we saw it get out to 71 picks, which is the longest draft we've seen since list sizes shrunk a few years ago. However, another characteristic was that the top end of 2024 wasn't considered as strong as, say, 2023. And by comparison, 2025, the top end, let's say the top 5 to 10 talents, those project as it currently stands to be much more top tier. So by comparison, the top end of next year is stronger than we saw in 2024, but the talent drops away earlier and it is also more compromised. Usually another way of analyzing a draft or assessing a draft is the quality of talls. Now, I don't have an amazing handle on the entire draft, but if you look at a lot of the top 25 prospects, there are a number of good quality talls, both forward and back, in, say, the top 25 as it currently stands. So from that point of view, this will be another decent draft for talls, but it is a little bit early for me to lock that in yet. As far as the distribution of talent between the different states, it seems a little bit more well-rounded this year. In 2024, we saw both Vic Country and Vic Metro really dominate the draft, and as such, they were also the best two teams in the National Carnival. Western Australia in particular, I think they were described as having the weakest talent pool in some time, whereas next year, there's a number of good West Australian talents that could easily be top 10 at this stage. That also applies to South Australia, who have at least a couple of top 10 prospects at this current point in time. However, we might see another year like 2023 where the Allies are pretty dominant because they could have 3 to 4 top prospects inside the top 10. And there's 3 potentially first round talents aligned to Sydney. There's about 4 in the top 25 aligned to the Gold Coast Suns. There is another top 5 prospect at this stage aligned to the Brisbane Lions, and we will get through specifics. Hey guys, just a quick note to let you know that this video is brought to you in a paid partnership with BetterHelp. Investing in yourself is important. People will invest time and money into their careers, they'll invest time and money into their fitness, but one aspect of the self that people can tend to overlook is the mind. And something like therapy could be the most underappreciated tool out there that people can use to invest in their mind. It's a common misconception that you need to be diagnosed with something like depression or anxiety to invest in your mental health. Therapy can be a great tool for self-improvement and investing in healthier habits and just talking to somebody about the things that are on your mind. And it's even better when they're a trained mental health professional. It's also really good to know that when you're expressing yourself, you can do so in a safe space without fear of judgment. BetterHelp is the paid partner of this video, and they're on a mission to help make starting therapy easier. It's a platform where therapists and their clients can communicate effectively and get the most out of therapy. And it's really easy to start with BetterHelp. To do this, all you have to do is go to the link in the description of this video, or simply go to betterhelp.com/truefooty. From there, you fill out a questionnaire that helps them assess your specific needs. And then in most cases, you're matched with a therapist within 48 hours. Then if you find that the therapist you're matched with doesn't feel like the right fit, you can easily switch to one at no additional cost. So if you're struggling, or perhaps you just feel like you could benefit from a therapy session, check out the link in my description or go to betterhelp.com/truefooty. That also gets you 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. Thanks guys, let's get back to the video. So what I want to do in this video is highlight a number of father-son prospects and go through the academy prospects, and mention another group of players that will likely feature in the top end of next year's draft who are not currently club aligned. But before we do that, let's have a look at what picks clubs hold in 12 months time. So I've got this from Big Footy from a guy called Law who's been doing this for years, and I'll get it up on the screen now. These teams are ranked 1 to 18 by the total value of their points, which, bear in mind, I think should be different the way that points are valued. I'm not 100% sure if Law has used the new points valuing system to equate those points. Either way, it doesn't matter a whole heap for this current point in time. However, you can see Richmond hold the most points because they hold picks 1 and 2. Now, this is based on the 2024 ladder, which is almost certainly going to be wrong. The odds of the ladder being exactly the same are like 1 in 6.4 quadrillion. That's not an exaggeration. You can look that up. But anyway, you can see that, West Coast holds a really strong hand because they had the Tom Barrass deal that was largely dealing in futures. Gold Coast traded into the future, and they have 4 top 25 picks there. Essendon hold 5, 8, 25, and 26. And if you look, with the amount of teams that have academy prospects who are likely to trade picks, someone like an Essendon to me jumps out as being a team who could use 25 and 26 to get another third first round draft pick in next year's draft. So they might be pretty well placed. Gold Coast, the Brisbane Lions, and the Sydney Swans in particular have some really juicy talent in the first round of next year. So as we said, Gold Coast has a pretty good hand. Sydney is ranked about 5th last there in terms of points value. This obviously assumes that they finish first on the ladder again because it's based on the 2024 ladder. So assuming they don't, they might have a better hand than that. There's also the big question of, what Chad Warner does 12 months from now, because that could help their draft hand if he does decide to leave their football club. But they will be a team that probably needs to find some points. But moving on, let's start talking about individual prospects. I want to start with father-sons. So there's about 3 or 4 that I'm aware of. The first one is Collingwood's Tom McGuan. He's the son of Mick, and he's 177 centimetre midfielder from Vic Metro, who's very clean and very consistent. At the moment, 177 centimetres is quite short, but obviously he's about 17 years old, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. He currently projects as roughly a first round draft pick, so Collingwood are in a decent position there considering they've already traded 2025's first rounder. They just need to find the points to match that. There's a young fella called Kalani White. This will be an interesting watch here because he is the son of Jeff White and therefore a father-son prospect for Melbourne, but he also lives in Queensland and falls under the Gold Coast Suns Academy. He's a 198 centimetre key defender. At this current point, I'm not 100% sure if he prefers one or the other. I don't know if anyone knows the answer to that, but that will be an interesting one. Similar to Nick Blakey, who was a father-son for North Melbourne, but opted to stay in the Sydney Swans Academy. I'm not sure what Kalani White's going to do, but he does shape to be probably a first round prospect at this current point in time. There's a couple of other later father sons, and bear in mind, I don't know all of them. These are just the ones I'm aware of. But West Coast has Charlie Banfield, son of Drew, who's an outside midfielder, sort of slash wingman, played in the Claremont Colts premiership winning side, and probably projects as a second round talent. We also have Louis Kellaway, who is a father-son prospect tied to Richmond, who I think is decent, but again, I'm not really too sure how likely he's early to go. Bear in mind, when I did this video a year ago, Tyler Welsh was considered a first round prospect, so things do change in a player's top year. Now we need to go through some of these academy prospects, and particularly from the Gold Coast Suns and the Sydney Swans. Both of these clubs are really well positioned for next year's draft. So you've got Zeke Hewland, younger brother of Bodie, and he's 178 centimeter, small midfielder slash defender. And at this current point in time, is considered a pick 1 contender and potentially, say top 2. He's probably the strongest of the academy prospects and could be the best talent in next year's draft. We also have Daniel Annable. He's aligned to the Brisbane Lions, and for yet another year, they have a top 5 midfield prospect. This guy's 183 centimeters. He's a very balanced inside midfielder that can play on the outside too, and I believe this would actually be Brisbane's first ever top 10 academy prospect. Bear in mind, they have done very well with the father-son rule recently. Either way, as you look at Brisbane's midfield transition, it's going to happen when guys like Neil and Zorko and the other experienced midfielders in that team, when they move on, there is a whole host of first-round top prospects to replace them. There is Bo Adensall, who at this point is probably a top 10 prospect. Bear in mind, it does change. He's a 180 centimeter midfielder forward, and he is aligned to the Gold Coast Suns. So they're going to have a little bit of a challenge on their hand getting points, but as you could see from when I showed up that points value graph that Law made, the Gold Coast have already done a lot of the legwork getting picks in this year's draft. Yet another Gold Coast Suns academy prospect, this will be the 4th I've mentioned if you include Kalani White, is Dylan Patterson, a 183 centimeter midfielder forward. Again, probably more projects as a top 25 prospect. So at this current point in time, it looks like we're going to see another year, much like 2023, when Gold Coast had 3 top 12 prospects, I think it was. They also had Will Graham at pick 26. They had Jed Walter at pick 2. I think this is going to be another similar year like that for the Gold Coast Suns this year, and they will be probably the best placed team when Tasmania comes around, considering their academy means that their own access to talent won't be compromised. We have a Max King in this year's draft, and no, it's not the 200 centimeter key forward from St Kilda. It's a 6'3" midfielder from the Swans Academy. So now we're talking about one of 3 Sydney players that could go in the first round at this current point in time. He's a big body midfielder. They also have Noah Chamberlain, who's a 192 centimeter forward. He's a bit of an undersized key forward at this current point in time, but there's still plenty of time to grow, but he has played on the wing as well. Then you've got Lachlan Carmichael, a 6-foot defender, also from the Swans Academy, also expected to probably go in the first round of next year's draft. So as we saw on the previous page, Sydney have picks 18, 36, 54, and 72. They're going to need to do some legwork to get enough points. Now, a lot of this can change. Like, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that one of these top 15 to 20 prospects goes undrafted. It can still happen, but Sydney are in a great position to replenish their list in 12 months' time. And if they all turn out good, they're going to have to really get on their bike to get enough points because the system has changed, and we'll talk about that shortly. So just to summarize how compromised the draft is at this point in time, bearing in mind I haven't been fully exhaustive, these are just the top 25 prospects at this current point in time. The Suns have 4 top 25 prospects. One of them is expected to go top 2, and another couple of them probably top 10. The Lions have a top 5 midfield prospect. The Swans have 3 first-round prospects. The Pies have 1 first-round prospect in Tom McGuan. The Eagles probably have a second-rounder, but that's probably a little more speculative, and I'm not sure about Louis Kellaway. So just on the point system, this will be an interesting time where we see probably the most compromised draft ever, and it's also harder than ever to match points for these prospects. So specifically, about 10,000 points have been shaved off the DVI in the new system. What does that mean? Well, the point system has been recalculated, and no picks after pick 54 in next year's draft hold any points value, whereas that was not true this year. It was up to pick 73. Essentially, that just means you can't stockpile pick 57, 59, 61, and use those to add up to match to a bid. Those picks hold 0 value anymore, so you have to hold earlier picks in that to have value. There's also been this 20% discount that clubs, whether it be father-son or any kind of academy, have when they're matching a bid. So if a bid comes in at pick 1, that's 3,000 points. You only need to get within 20% of that. This has now also changed to 10%. So it'll be interesting to see whether these northern clubs, in particular Gold Coast, maybe not Brisbane, but certainly Sydney, what will happen if they don't get enough points to match these prospects? Now, they can take points deficits into next year, but I wonder if this is the first year we see a highly rated academy prospect or father-son potentially not make it to their club. I'd imagine it still happens, but it's interesting to consider. So let's talk about some other prospects. One other thing I'll point out is that we've got a couple of, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 actually, brothers of existing players in this year's draft, and I'll mention the ones that are highly rated. So we talked about Zeke Hewland. He is the younger brother of Bodie. We've also talked about him as an academy prospect. Willem Dersma is the third brother. Sorry, I had to do the math on that. I was like, is there 3 or are there 4 Dersmas? He is the third Dersma. Oh, I guess he's the 4th if you consider his sister. That's why I was thinking of 4. Yeah, Willem Dersma is expected to probably be like top 5 at this current point in time. He's a 191 centimeter utility. He's played a little bit behind the ball, played a little bit in midfield. It will be interesting to see how he develops because at this current point in time, I'm not really sure what position he's going to be, but he is blessed with athleticism and great footballing skills. So I'd imagine Willem Dersma features fairly early in next year's draft. There's also Daniel Curtin's younger brother, Cody, from Western Australia, a 197 centimeter key position defender who's probably expected to go in the first round of next year's draft, and some consider him to be, well, at least the second best West Australian product. So that's 3. And there's also a Louis Emmett in next year's draft, and I'm not sure if he's related to Tom Emmett from Fremantle. So I'll put that out there. I'm not sure. But those are the brothers that I'm aware of. So we've spent a lot of time harping on about the academy prospects, but a lot of them do dominate the top end of next year's draft. So to talk about some players that are not club tied, in addition to Cody Curtin, in addition to Willem Dersma, probably the best open pool prospect at this current point in time is Dyson Sharp. And I think if the draft is held right now, it sounds like he might go pick 1, but let's say at least top 2 in next year's draft. A 188 centimeter midfielder from South Australia, very powerful, and I believe he's already played at Sandford level, which is very impressive. There's Cooper Duft Titler or Titler. Both of those, don't sound... Anyway, he's a 199 centimeter ruck forward from Vic Metro, so probably the highest rated tall at this current point in time. It's just interesting and worth noticing that we have a couple, at least in the top 6, as it currently stands, according to some rankings I've read, that are genuine key position players, which is good to know if you have an appetite for that. Not you personally, I mean your club. There's also Louis Emmett, who I just talked about. I'm not sure if he's a brother of Tom Emmett, another 198 centimeter ruck forward from Vic Metro, probably going to go top 10 at this current point in time. Then there's an early contender for my favourite player in the draft. We have Fred Rodriguez as well from South Fremantle and Western Australia, who is probably considered Western Australia's best talent. I saw ESPN rated him at the moment as being the 6th best player in next year's draft. So he's a very silky, outside, classy player, perfect for the Eagles. I'm already gunning to get him in next year's draft. But he could be the earliest drafted West Australian player in a number of years. I think there was Daniel Curtin was pick 8. Bo Allen was the earliest this year at 16. So it's good for WA to get some real good talent in next year's draft. We've got a couple of Vic Country boys in Riley Onley and Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves. Onley is a 6'5" midfielder, 194 centimeters. Again, like he could grow. I said the same thing about Josh Smiley 12 months ago. I said 194 centimeters at 17. Is he going to be a 2-meter midfielder? I don't know if Smiley grew at all in his top age year, and that could be the case for Riley. Either way, a pretty inside-out midfielder, very powerful on the inside, but does have some running capacity. Could be a top 10 prospect, and Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves is a top 10 prospect. I couldn't possibly mention all the first round, but I've given you a pretty exhaustive look at a general profile of next year's draft. And of course, we will be back next year to cover it all. As I said, it is an important draft. As compromised as it is, I wonder if academies are just going to become an increasingly important part of the way clubs assemble talent, and that will probably lead clubs to really invest in their own academies, especially once we get up to 19 teams. But it does feel like an important time, and perhaps the last real crack clubs have to get into the draft before Tasmania get in. Now, perhaps Tasmania coming in isn't the absolute doom and gloom scenario that has probably been suggested, including by me, but we'll talk about that in another video. So make sure you're subscribed, and I'll do a video soon talking about which clubs, in my opinion, are best placed for when Tasmania enter the competition. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you thought, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.